Hi, and welcome to our 2024 Outlook Conversation with the CEO webinar, our last of 2023. We appreciate all of you watching our webinars this year and shaping the content by submitting these questions. Today's webinar is going to be a little bit different in that I have Rick Dennen, founder and CEO of Oak Street Funding, to answer many of the questions that we couldn't get into previous webinars. So, Rick, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Like being the cleanup.
Well, I will go ahead and start off with, let's take a look at the 2024 outlook. What are the top two trends that you are seeing that will lead us into 2024?
It really hasn't changed much in most of 23. It's, how's the recession going to settle out? Is it going to be a soft landing? When is it going to be? The timing, those types of things. So I think between inflation, between the Fed settling down on interest rates, I think those are probably the two most important topics, as we look into 2024.
Okay, great. So 2024 is also an election year. Do you see how that will impact deals, any activity in that way?
I don't think deals correlated to election year, but I think deals correlated to kind of the changes in the expectations of interest rates. Right now, I think the latest reports I'm reading, whether it's like a Goldman Sachs report or a Stifel or, probably Fed starting to ease, June, July timeframe and, probably 25 basis points. So, when you start getting an easing of that, just like when you increase rates, it slows down M&A. Rates start getting lower, I think it'll increase some M&A. That, along with the amount of capital we've talked about in prior, webinar series, that the amount of capital that needs to be deployed is there. And because rates go up and M&A slows down, that capital doesn't go away. Right. It just compresses the timeline in which these deals need to get done because you typically have a 10-year fund, and those haven't changed. So, I suspect that the activity will pick back up. We've already seen a little bit of a pickup, but as rates continue to be, expected to be reduced, I do think the activity next year will be pretty decent.
Okay, great. So which OSF loan product will be most useful or best leveraged for growth in 2024 following these trends?
We've always been, I would say, an 80-20 approach on loans where we've got, 80% of our dollars and 20% of our units are for M&A activity, succession planning. And the opposite goes true for like working capital loans and things like that. So, so sticking with those first two, succession is what it is. The ownership of the industries we're in just continue to move up. That doesn't stop. And, as we talked, if interest rates start easing, I think that activity will pick up. So succession, M&A, they kind of go hand in hand a little bit, but
okay.
I think that's where we're going to see the most product usage.
Okay, great. So how will new technologies impact the future of the investment landscape?
AI, is one that it's like the buzzword today. We talked about it today here at Oak Street, looking at some marketing activities and things. And I think that's going to continue to evolve. It's not going to go away. It's going to continue to get better and more usage, whether that's software development, whether it's underwriting, whether it's problem loan identification. I just think there's so many data points that AI will be able to use as indicators, and it's going to do nothing but get better and better each year. So as there's more data available, that gets better, and the algorithms will get better, I think, and so
right.
The usage is going to be more prevalent.
So you see AI as more of a positive thing than anything else?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of positives that can occur, but I think, it's how do you control AI?
Right.
And you read all these different articles. I'm clearly not the expert in it, so I don't want to,
this is a whole other webinar.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not, purporting to be the expert here, but you look at it and you say, okay, when you look at some of the things it can do,
right.
It's pretty scary, and there somehow needs to be controls there. I personally don't see how you can control it, though.
Another webinar.
Another webinar. Thank you.
Okay, so you went through a president transition with Alicia Chandler in July of last year.
Yep.
So can you talk about how others can lead their organization through a leadership transition in 2024?
What I would say is it really comes down to, the person that is currently leading. Do they genuinely want to have a transition? Do they genuinely want to see the organization perpetuate itself and to continue to do good and evolve and, really kind of sustain that company in perpetuity? Because you get some people who they're so used to being the center point, the focal point, the leader. They want the kudos.
Yeah.
And I think that if that person hasn't mentally relinquished that in their mind that they want to turn it over, that transition is going to be tough. Now I'm talking kind of on one end of the spectrum. But I just, for me, it's been wonderful to be able to see the organization, from a piece of paper to where it is today. And then it was really important to me to hand it to a member of the management team who so deeply believed in the model and what we were trying to build, and were so passionate about the employees and the customers that it was easy to kind of do that. And you just want to see the continued success of the organization. So that's kind of a tough question. But number one, it's like the current leader needs to be mentally prepared to hand those reins over to somebody else. Let them make mistakes, just like I made mistakes, but let them make mistakes, let them make decisions, and I think that's the highest opportunity you have for success. So, we've always been an organization about it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. And it kind of lays right into, Alicia taking over the organization. And she's taken that exact approach.
It seems like it's been a very healthy transition, and she's great at what she does. All right. So at the end of 2025, almost all of the individual, estate, and pass-through provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act put in place during the Trump administration will expire. So if I want to sell my business before the expiration of the Tax Cuts and the Job Act at the end of 2025, what should I be doing today?
It's no different than what you should be doing day to day with, putting together a good strategy in place, understanding what your strengths and weaknesses are, developing your people, putting in new technologies, things like that are going to make your organization perpetuate itself. Some of the things that you're going to get the best value for are continued growth, strong management teams, the technology. So to the extent you're trying to do that, make sure that you've got that consistency and you're not taking your eye off the ball on managing the business because you're looking for a home in Florida or a boat or something along those lines. You really get it to the finish line. It's going to be very hard to get it to the finish line. Once you do, get it over the finish line, get it done, and then move on to the next thing.
Great advice. And I do want to take a moment to tell the listeners that we'll have Steve Blake from Somerset CPAs coming back in again to cover tax implications in 2024 for our third annual webinar in January. So we'll get to talk more in depth about tax implications then. But moving on. So Rick, if someone is looking to acquire in Q3 of 2024, where should they be in the process at this point, the end of 2023? Do you have a rough timeline that they should follow maybe?
We've sold our organization. We had to sell it 3 times. One of them we sold within a month, which was crazy, right? And we found the right partner at the time to be able to do that. I would say in today's world, just the diligence that people are going to put into these deals is probably expanded a little bit because of COVID. And, how does the macroeconomic things of the war, the 2 wars going on right now, supply chain, there's so many things that kind of need to go into thinking through these. I don't think it's shortened. I don't think deals get done in a month period of time. So If you're looking for that, make sure you understand, you know what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you know what you're good at. And if you're trying to complement that in what you're trying to accomplish in that transaction, and don't get emotional.
Yeah.
It's kind of like buying a car. You go in, like there's, millions of cars on the road. You can always find the next one down. Don't get emotional about it and pay too much for it. Have too big of an ego that you want to make sure you get this done and you get an acquisition done. Certainly, being inquisitive could be very valuable to the business, but it can also be very disruptive to the extent that you've got to merge cultures. If the cultures aren't right, there's a lot more things that can go wrong, it seems like, than can go right. So just make sure you're knocking those things off the list before you get into a deal.
Okay, great. So we had a few people ask about how to combat rising costs in 2024 to still be in a profitable business. Sorry, do you have any tips there?
Make sure you've got somebody looking at, the pennies. Yep. When you're looking at financial statements, I know that there's people that are looking at, where we're spending our marketing dollars, where we're spending our technology dollars, and just, making sure you're getting, you're talking to your vendors, you're up to date on what's going on, and you're getting the best prices that you can get for things. Maybe there's services that you don't need, and if you go back to that previous question, I remember, in the fifth year of one of our PE investments, we came down to the end, and it's okay. In this year, what can we not spend? What do we not need for the next year or two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Trim the fat
And cut some of the expenses. And even if you can take out, let's just $100,000.
Mm-hmm.
If you're getting paid a multiple of EBITDA of an 8 times, well, that 100,000 you just saved could translate into 800,000 of extra purchase price.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So it's not just a 1 times 1 approach.
Right.
It's 1 times your multiple on what you're going to save if you can cut expenses. So when you think about it that way, it kind of magnifies the importance of looking at that stuff. But the same thing I would say holds true on your pricing on the revenue side.
Okay.
What can you do to increase your pricing, 10 basis points or 10% that can also get that extra piece of it? That 10% is really worth, 80% if you factor in the multiple that you're going to receive.
Okay.
Whatever that may be.
Okay. So moving into some specific industry questions, where do you see the insurance industry heading in 2024?
The industry is a large industry. It's been picked over and, been consolidating for the past, very hard for the past, say, 12 years, probably been going on for 15 of the 20 years we've been in business. So, but that won't stop. I think there's always going to be that M&A activity. There's always going to be reasons for companies to merge. So I think it's going to continue to evolve that way, but just the number of transactions is probably not going to increase, but the dollars could be the same or even increase.
Okay, great. So where do you see the future of the CPA industry going?
I think it's in the initial stages of that.
Okay.
We've talked about the insurance, the RA industry is behind when insurance started the consolidation. I think CPA is kind of the next one behind RAA.
Okay.
Same type of asset class with, it's a service business. It's an intangible asset, from a lending perspective, a cash flow business. So you've got a recurring revenue stream. And I think there's now when I started in public accounting, there was the big 8. Then it was, 7, 6, 5. Now it's 4. So it's the big 4, but you've got a lot of super regionals like Crow, Somerset, Sickage, some of the other ones that are out there. But you still have a lot of small players that might not do the same type of consulting and attestation type work, but there's going to be a shortage in the number of people and resources available.
Right.
I think that trend is going to continue. So being able to, use technology, AI, things like that to get more work done with less people. I think that will certainly evolve in that industry. But I think the number of smaller players won't evolve like that and be as innovative. And it might be easier just to consolidate with some of the larger players. So I think that's more in the initial stages, and I think it will consolidate going forward.
All right. So as we wrap up, what are you looking forward to in the 2024 industries that you serve?
Boy, I wish I could say stability. I hope for more stability in the world as a whole. I mentioned earlier, you think about Ukraine and what's going on with Israel and Gaza, and I hope those things kind of slow down and stop, and the world can
repair.
Kind of prepare and settle down a little bit. But I do think from an economic perspective that it's going to be a softer landing than what was originally anticipated.
Okay.
I do think inflation, we've seen some of that. There have been some up and downs. But I do think that is going to slow down, which means interest rates should follow behind that, typically, 50 basis points behind it. And, unemployment's back down to 3% type levels in a lot of different areas. So, it seems like things are going swimmingly from the standpoint of an economic perspective. In these same reports I'm reading, because I'm not the expert, we can expect that then for about 3 years before we see another major shift, in a potential recession or something like that. So I see 24 almost as a period of time where it's going to probably be more stable and settling throughout 24 than what we saw in 23 and 22 coming out of the pandemic with inflation, and things like that. So I see a little bit more stability.
Okay. I like your crystal ball outlook.
Yeah,
there, Rick.
Sure.
Well, that is all the questions I have for you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays. So we're excited to wrap up our 2023 On Point webinar series. We did receive some questions about strategic planning and implementing a plan in 2024. So Alicia Chandler, president of Oak Street Funding, recorded a podcast all about strategic planning to accompany this webinar. We will see you back here in January. Happy holidays.